Final Dolphins versus Jaguars week one prediction, Miami Dolphins fans. How are we doing today? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. In the last video we did, in the first preview video for the Dolphins versus the Jaguars, week one matchup, we knocked out some keys to victory. If you ended up missing that one, definitely go back and check that one out. But today we're going to take a dive into that full injury report, which looks a lot better than what it did on Wednesday, which we sort of alluded to. You don't want to spend too much time in the early part of the week looking at an injury report. But we will talk about that. We'll discuss the top things that I'm going to be having my eye on Sunday. We're also going to tackle the viewer submitted questions as well. Thanks to everyone that submitted a question, as always, for these videos. We like to tackle some viewer questions as well. So know that for the future in the event you didn't get your question submitted this week. And then I'm going to give my final score prediction for that week one Dolphins-Jags matchup as well. But that's actually what I want from you. Before we jump in, your final score prediction. How do you see things playing out in this week one matchup between our Dolphins and the in-state Jacksonville Jaguars? Go ahead and drop them in the comments. Real quick as well, before we get started, I asked a random trivia question in that previous video, something along the lines of back in 2020, the last time the Miami Dolphins lost a week one matchup, who led the team, the Miami Dolphins, in rushing touchdowns that year with just 4? And I think the player had like 33 yards on 28 carries. I told people not to cheat, and luckily no one did end up cheating. Didn't have a single correct answer that was at least submitted in the comments. The final actual answer to that question was Jordan Howard. How many people remember him even being a member of the Miami Dolphins? Once I saw that, I'm like, you know what? We got to incorporate this into the video somehow, some way. If and when those kind of opportunities arise, we'll continue to put new trivia questions into these videos as well. But we talked about the final injury report, so we will flash that up onto the screen. And as you'll see, it's much, much lighter than it was on Wednesday. Malik Washington actually registered a DNP for Friday's practice. He has been ruled out. Now, it was already going to be Braxton Berrios getting that first crack at the new kick return. This move essentially just completely solidifies it. But the other thing that this means, we're likely going to see one of those practice squad wide receivers called up, because with Washington out, we've got Tyreek, Waddle, Berrios, and Grant DeBose. Those are your 4 players on the active roster at wide receiver right now. So it's either going to be Erik Ezukanma, Robbie Chosen, or Eskridge that's going to end up likely being elevated. The only other Miami Dolphins player with an injury designation you'll see there is Jalen Ramsey, who did get in a limited practice session on Friday. You probably know by now, shortly after the announcement of his new contract extension. Funny timing as well there. Also makes him the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. If anyone has any questions on that contract, on my feelings on that, we can go into more depth there. Let's just say I like the move. It's an interesting move because it's an aging cornerback. But where I tend to say, you know what, I'm kind of okay with this one is, remember when Jalen Ramsey was coming into the draft? It was, man, this dude's versatile. He can play cornerback. He can play in the slot. He can play back and safety. If push comes to shove, if he loses a step, whatever, you can probably move this guy back to safety and get another couple of extra years of him. So while cornerbacks, they age fast, they age poorly, Ramsey is kind of one of those rare specimens of an athlete that, you know what, he's got enough versatility. We're going to see some of that versatility on display this year. You can potentially move him back to safety at some point in his career if you need to. I kind of got off track there, but he's listed as questionable for Sunday versus his former team. Sounds like Jalen Ramsey wants to give it a go, likely will give it a go on Sunday. Just always have in the back of your mind, though, that this team, you know it, they treat injuries, and the way that they do it is they typically err on the side of caution. So even if he does give it a go, just know that there are some people internally that would rather he rest, get completely healed, that soft tissue-ish injury, the hamstring. Just know that there are some people inside the building there that would like him to rest. The only other thing that I'd like to point out from the injury report is that Aaron Brewer was a full participant on Friday. He does not carry an injury designation into Sunday, which likely means your starting offensive line from left to right is Teron Armstead, Robert Jones, Brewer at center, Liam Eichenberg at right guard, Austin Jackson at right tackle. We're actually going to jump into some more offensive line talk right away because I want to talk about some of the top things that I'm going to have my eye on in that week 1 matchup on Sunday. And unfortunately, I'm a broken record on this for the however many year. It's will the offensive line hold up? And how does this offensive line gel together? Because quite honestly, it's the 5 that we sort of at this point in the season hoped would be starting at on the offensive line with those first 5 guys. But at the same time, it's like they haven't been the ones that are getting all of the reps and nothing was really solidified. Hell, even like last week at this point in time. And it's funny because there's like a story to be told about all 5 of these projected guys. You got Teron Armstead, arguably our best offensive lineman, but never healthy. Can he stay healthy? That should be his goal in this game. Protect from either Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Hines Allen, whatever he wants to be called. He needs to protect Tua first and foremost. Oh, that's 1A. 1B, stay healthy. Just stay healthy. You got Robert Jones at left guard. At this point in time, we've seen him get some spot start duty. This is a week 1 starting gig for Robert Jones. It's an opportunity to say, yep, I'm the man for this job. Butch Berry was able to put his stamp on me. Mike McDaniel believes in me, get me in this game. I'm here for the long haul. We'll see how that goes. I prefer him as kind of a spot start kind of guy. Here we are, though, in week 1, and he is our starting left guard. At center, we already talked about Aaron Brewer. Does the hand hold up? He had a couple of broken bones in the hand. He had a laceration on the hand. We know that he can get stuff done in the second level as a run blocker. Is his pass protection going to end up holding up? How does he gel in this offense with Tua Tagovailoa? Is there going to be snapping issues? He's got a story. Liam Eichenberg has been sprinkled all over this offensive line. Can he finally solidify and find a home at right guard, which he alleges is probably his most comfortable spot? But is it going to translate onto the field? We'll see. And then right tackle, you got Austin Jackson, who actually looked like a competent starter last year, looked really good at times, but how does he perform now that Robert Hunt isn't right next to him at right guard? So like I said, there's a story for all 5 of these offensive linemen. I want to see how they hold up, how they gel together on Sunday. The next thing I'm keeping an eye on is that overcoming a shortage at wide receiver, because outside of whoever ends up getting called up, because I'm assuming someone will, how do we find ways to move the ball downfield if it's not Tyreek Hill, if it's not Jaylen Waddle? Because you know damn well this Jaguars coaching staff and secondary, they know who the studs are. They know who they need to take away. So how do we overcome them potentially being those top 2 guys and not having a lot of depth behind them? Well, we talked about, does Jonnu Smith get more looks? Does the tight ends in general get more looks in the passing game? Does Achane make plays out of the backfield? Do you line him up in the slot or out wide and move a guy like Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle into the slot? I'm curious to see just straight up, how are these guys lining up? How are we going to overcome that? Because right now, I look at that wide receiver position a couple of months back and say, we got depth on depth on depth. We're plenty fine. Not the case right now. I think we might need I think we've got some solutions in-house to get this done. And the last thing I wanted to keep an eye on before jumping into these viewer questions is simply the rotation that we're going to roll with on that defensive line, because you got Zach Sealer, you got Calais Campbell kind of as your mainstays. New defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, he is a believer in a rotation. He's a believer in fresh bodies. So what does that look like for Benito Jones, Brandon Peely, Deshaun Hand? We're going to get a healthy dosage of snaps from the combination of those 2 to 3 guys. It's just, where do they play in? In what situations do they play in? Are we going to try to keep Sealer and Campbell basically fresh, maybe for the push, the stretch run of that 4th quarter? Really curious to see how that rotation plays out, and then who's making the plays once their number is called to come into the game. Like I said, let's jump into the questions as well. As always for this video, we always ask for questions, either the preview video before this, and then on the YouTube community page, I put a post out looking for questions as well. So each and every week, go ahead, give me your questions, and we'll try to get as many answered as possible. The first one for today: Who is a player you predict to move backwards in their progression or production this season? Now, this is kind of interesting to me because I brought up this guy, and it's Austin Jackson, because we saw him progress very, very nicely last year, correct? Absolutely. Here's the issue. He always, now I shouldn't say always had Robert Hunt next to him, but he had that protection more often than not of Robert Hunt being that veteran guard next to him where you didn't really have to worry about what was going on to your left. If you're playing right tackle, Robert Hunt, for 9 times out of 10, he was getting his job done. Well, now that it's Liam Eichenberg, do things look different for Austin Jackson? Is there added pressure? Is there added responsibilities on a guy like Austin Jackson? So I'm not trying to go out there and predict that it doesn't look as good, but that's definitely a guy that I have my eye on to see if he does look on par with the performance that he was able to put in last year. That was from Chris, by the way. This one is from Dean. Who will cover the Jags tight ends? That's a great question. We talked a little bit about that in the first preview video about Evan Ingram. What did he have last year? 114 receptions, led all NFL tight ends, nearly 1,000 yards. I think it was 4 touchdowns. That is the biggest familiar face right now for Trevor Lawrence. It's him and Christian Kirk. And man, the chemistry that Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram showed last year exceeded my expectations. Let's put it that way. So I talked about some of the linebackers and the safeties. And quite honestly, I think it's still going to boil down to those guys. If it's a linebacker, if it's David Long, if it's Jordan Brooks, those guys need to show that ability to play a little bit more in coverage, but don't rule out the idea of the Miami Dolphins trotting out a third safety. That's another thing that Anthony Weaver does as well. So look for maybe it ends up being a higher priority on trying to slow down Evan Ingram, and you put a guy like Holland or Poyer or Elijah Campbell out there as well. So keep an eye on some 3 safety looks as well, but this is definitely a concern of the Dolphins defensive coaching staff. We'll see how they end up tackling it. Kangaroo Bob comes in with, always has one of the best names. If Aaron Brewer is out, are you worried we will have snapping issues? Since it looks like Aaron Brewer is going to play, I'll kind of I'll ad-lib a little bit on this one and give you a little bit of insight. If Aaron Brewer would have been out, Mike McDaniel preferred Liam Eichenberg starting at center, which would have meant Lester Cotton would have been at right guard. Now, I have it where Butch Berry would have felt more comfortable with Andrew Meyer at center and leaving Liam Eichenberg at right guard. So we likely won't encounter that situation on Sunday. It sounds like Aaron Brewer will be all systems go. But if something were to happen, if he re-injures that hand, God forbid, something different happens as well. Keep that in mind because it's going to be very interesting to see, does the head coach's preference end up weighing for a little bit more? Or is he going to have faith in Butch Berry and the offensive line coach, the guy that's working with those guys day in, day out? So maybe a little bit of an internal struggle. Maybe things change as practice goes on as well. But just an interesting nugget in the event that Brewer wouldn't have been able to go on Sunday. Let's do one more. Oh, I'm sorry. I messed that up. Give me 1 second here. We'll get it scrolling on the bottom. It takes up less of the screen. All right. Now we party. John Johnson comes in with, if you could pick between Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence as the Dolphins quarterback moving forward, who would you go with? This is an interesting question because I was texting with a buddy not too long ago about the idea that Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence, they should legit have an NFL rivalry. They've played in a national championship against each other. So obviously they spent a lot of their college years being similar years. They're both top 5 picks. Lawrence obviously being number 1, Tua being number 5, albeit different years. But then you've also got an in-state, the Dolphins and Jaguars is like, I wanted to say in-state rivalry. I don't even know if it's quite to that level yet. But the fact that these two quarterbacks with that amount of history and similarities and struggles that they've had, contracts that they just got extended, the fact that they play in the same state, this should be a little bit more rivalry than it already is. Now, I know I didn't do a damn thing right there to answer your question, but I kind of just wanted to vent and get that off my chest. But I'm going to go with Tua in this situation. I do think Trevor Lawrence has kind of drawn a little bit of a short straw the way Tua did his first couple of years. I don't know that he's always had the right coaching staff, play calling, playmakers. I think they're doing a little bit better job with that now. I think there's a ton of pressure on him now, especially after just getting paid, $55 million per year. Tua has technically shown more Now, Trevor Lawrence has been a little bit healthier. I'll give him that. But given our offense, the history that Tua has had in this offense the last couple of years, the promise that he's shown moving forward, being able to stay healthy all of last year, I am sticking with Tua. Like I said, I don't mind Trevor Lawrence, but give me the guy that's been here, done that, has shown it in this system. I've been a Tua guy since his days at Bama. I'm not turning my back on it now. All right, let's go into my prediction. Like I said, go ahead and drop your predictions in the comments as well. Curious to see if anyone can get it spot on. We had it a couple of times last year. If not spot on, let's just get a bunch of Dolphins wins in there. But I'm going to go with a 10-point win, a 31-21. Part of me was thinking, you know what, with it being week one, you got a lot of new faces on the offensive line, some uncertainty on that offensive line. Maybe there's going to be some false start penalties, some sacks given up, just not a lot of continuity. I wasn't going to give us 31, but man, Mike McDaniels really had these teams going in his opportunities for season opening games. 2 years ago, we played the Patriots. I don't remember exactly how many points we scored. We weren't an offensive juggernaut, but you saw that the potential was there. And mind you, that was the first game in Mike McDaniel's career in his system with Tua in that system. And then last year, what? Tua throws for the third most yards in a history of week one games in that game against the Chargers where we scored like 35 points or whatever it was. We've been shown that our offense is ready to go in these week one games. So I think that we can put up some points against the Jaguars defense that talked about this in the preview as well. I think they'll be improved. I think they made some decent additions to the secondary. They've got one of the better pass rushing, edge rushing duos in the entire NFL. So I think there is some cause for concern. But at the end of the day, I think we've got enough offense, and I think it's going to come out, I don't want to say guns a-blazing, but I think there's not going to be quite as many hiccups in the Dolphins offense compared to a lot of the offenses we see around the NFL. So give me the Dolphins 31-21 defensively. I'll touch on real quick. Like I said, I don't mind what the Jaguars have going on offense, but it's some new faces. Gabe Davis is a new face. Brian Thomas Jr. is a new face. There's a lot of new things going on with the Jaguars where I think they can get there, but maybe there ends up being some growing pains. I've liked what I've seen so far from Anthony Weaver in this defense. If Jalen Ramsey ends up being able to go, you know that they're not going to want to target him whatsoever. He's going to want to make plays against his former team. I think we've got enough on defense to hold them in that 21-24 area, and I think we can do our job in scoring more than that. So give me the Dolphins 31, the Jaguars 21. Like I said, go ahead, drop your predictions in the comments. Let's see how many Dolphins wins we can rack up in there. Real quick, before we sign off, my goal for Sunday, I don't have an exact time yet, but I want to go live for my post-game recap. So stay tuned to the YouTube, the Fins Up Network community page. When I know more information, I'll post it there. And then I'll also create the video so that it shows up. And if you're subscribed and got your notifications on, you'll know exactly when we're planning on going live. So would love to have you guys join for that as well. We're here, Dolphins fans. I'm jacked up. I'm recording this Friday evening. I've got too much damn time before before this game ends up happening. But stay strong, stay hydrated, stay in there, and we will talk to you guys after the Dolphins week one. Hopefully victory. And until then, Miami Dolphins fans, fins up.